Hey, this is Chris Franco, and you are listening to Compound Money Quietly, the CMQ Investing Podcast. CMQ investors, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. A few years back, maybe even more than a few years back, I started asking myself questions like this. What is one characteristic or trait that if I could wake up with it tomorrow, I would have an immediate competitive advantage?
Teeth. That's my final answer.
The topic of this episode was also one of the answers that I first came up with to that question.
Well, what's the answer? Is it teeth or what?
Long-term thinking.
Oh, Scooby-Doo. Hey, that's the glass I keep my teeth in.
If you can train your brain to think about the long-term impact of your present-day decisions, you will have a competitive advantage over just about everyone else. The focus of this episode is not just that idea, but it's the person where I first got this idea from, and whose life, as you'll learn, really illustrates the power of long-term thinking. That person is Jeff Bezos. The reason I'm doing this episode now is because, well, some recent headlines. Jeff Bezos made a big announcement this month about his space company, Blue Origin. Next month on July 20th, which is almost exactly a month away from today, Blue Origin's New Shepard spacecraft is going to space. But what's different about the trip this time is that there will be human passengers on board. Now, this is big news in itself, but what makes it really big news is that Jeff Bezos, yes, Jeff Bezos, will be one of those passengers. Jeff Bezos is going to space.
Wait, he's really going?
The reason this inspired me to make an entire episode about long-term thinking is because when I heard that news, I immediately thought back to something I learned about Jeff Bezos about a year and a half ago. It was actually in my own efforts to compile everything I knew about long-term thinking and why it works, and you'll hear all those details shortly. Jeff Bezos has wanted to go to space since at least as far back as when he was in high school. A little bit of background information is important here.
Tell me more.
Bezos was born on January 12th, 1964. His parents were actually teenagers when he was born, and unfortunately they divorced about a year after his birth. Bezos, I'll call him Jeff because we're buddies. Jeff stayed with his mom, and when she remarried in 1968, he took his stepfather's last name, which was Bezos. In high school, and this probably shouldn't come as a surprise, Jeff Bezos proved to be a hard worker, and he was a superstar student. In addition to working as the line cook during the breakfast shift at McDonald's, Bezos was the valedictorian of his graduating class. And as valedictorians typically do, he gave a speech at his graduation. What he talked about is, well, it's pretty cool when you think about this news. He told the audience that he dreamed of the day when mankind would colonize space. Now, at the time, I'm sure people kind of rolled their eyes, and that's understandable, but as you'll learn about Jeff Bezos, this is how he thinks. After high school, Jeff Bezos attended Princeton University, and while he was there, actually served as the president of the Princeton chapter, wait for it, of the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. After graduating, you might have thought, well, maybe he'll go work for NASA. But instead, Jeff Bezos went to Wall Street. I first read about this probably 8 years ago in a book called The Everything Store by Brad Stone. The book describes the decision-making process that Bezos used when he was deciding if he should leave his lucrative job at a hedge fund called D.E. Shaw. Not only was he wondering if he should leave the job, but he had to decide if doing it now was the right thing to do because, well, he would also leave behind a yearly bonus that apparently was pretty big. Why would he leave? He had an idea to start a company where he would sell books online. E-commerce.
Yeah, so that's the idea for my company, and I quit my job earlier.
God, Bezos, we're gonna start calling you Bozo. Jeff Bezos, right? You get it like Bozo the clown. I'm so rich.
This is where I first learned of Bezos' regret minimization framework. This is a direct quote from that book, The Everything Store. Quote, "So looking back on life's important junctures was on Bezos' mind when he came up with what he calls the regret minimization framework to decide the next step to take at this juncture in his career. When you are in the thick of things, you can get confused by small stuff," Bezos said a few years later. "I knew when I was 80 that I would never, for example, think about why I walked away from my 1994 Wall Street bonus right in the middle of the year at the worst possible time. That kind of thing just isn't something you worry about when you're 80 years old. At the same time, I knew that I might sincerely regret not having participated in this thing called the internet that I thought was going to be a revolutionizing event. When I thought about it that way, it was incredibly easy to make the decision. So that long-term decision was to leave his company, to leave D.E. Shaw, forget about his bonus, pack up his stuff, move out west, and start a company that sells books online. In previous episodes, I've spoken about Jeff Bezos' annual shareholder letters. The very first letter dates back to 1997, and it positions the idea of long-term thinking as one of the pillars of Amazon's success. On the very first page it reads, all about the long term. Here's what it says below. We believe the fundamental measure of our success will be the shareholder value we create over the long term. This value will be a direct result of our ability to extend and solidify our current market leadership position. The stronger our market leadership, the more powerful our economic model. Market leadership can translate directly to higher revenue, higher profitability, greater capital velocity, and correspondingly stronger returns on invested capital. Our decisions have consistently reflected this focus. We first measure ourselves in terms of the metrics most indicative of our market leadership: customer and revenue growth, the degree to which our customers continue to purchase from us on a repeat basis, and the strength of our brand. We have invested and will continue to invest aggressively to expand and leverage our customer base, our brand, and our infrastructure as we move to establish an enduring franchise. Because of our emphasis on the long term, we may make decisions and weigh trade-offs differently than some companies. Accordingly, we want to share with you our fundamental management and decision-making approach so that you, our shareholders, may confirm that it is consistent with your investment philosophy. This focus on the long term, by the way, it never changed. Fast forward to 2009. In that letter to shareholders, which was sent during an economic crisis, by the way, Bezos wrote the following. In this turbulent global economy, our fundamental approach remains the same. Stay heads down, focused on the long term, and obsessed over customers. So why is this so useful? Why is long-term thinking such a good idea? This is what Jeff Bezos told Wired magazine in 2011. Quote, if everything you do needs to work on a 3-year time horizon, then you're competing against a lot of people. But if you're willing to invest on a 7-year time horizon, you're now competing against a fraction of those people because very few companies are willing to do that. Just by lengthening the time horizon, you can engage in endeavors that you could never otherwise pursue. At Amazon, we like things to work in 5 to 7 years. We're willing to plant seeds, let them grow, and we're very stubborn. We say we're stubborn on vision and flexible on details. In some cases, things are inevitable. The hard part is that you don't know how long it might take, but you know it will happen if you're patient enough. Ebooks had to happen. Infrastructure web services had to happen. So you can do these things with conviction if you are long-term oriented and patient. Long-term thinking can give you an advantage as an investor. This is a topic that I have no doubt we will probably talk about more in upcoming episodes, but I want to leave you with some quotes from some of the greatest investing minds of all time. Quotes that are about the advantage of thinking long-term as an investor. Seth Klarman says that the single greatest edge an investor can have is a long-term orientation. And a long-term orientation, remember, that's what Jeff Bezos has. That's what he had when he was deciding to do things like create Amazon Web Services, or even when he decided to go out to Seattle and start Amazon in the first place. Lee Lu, who's one of Charlie Munger's investment partners and someone who Charlie Munger calls the Warren Buffett of China, Lee Lu says the most profitable kind of investing is long-term investing. Speaking of Charlie Munger once said that if you invest the way that people gamble at casinos, you're not going to do very well. It's the long-term investment that works best. But if you like the action of investing, sometimes winning, sometimes losing, just like the action in the casino, those people are not my people. I like the long-term investors who figure out something that is going to work over the long term and buy that. That makes me think about what we just heard Jeff Bezos say about certain things that are inevitable. Phil Fisher once said that it's appalling the nerve strain people put themselves under trying to buy something today and sell it tomorrow. It's a small win proposition. If you are a truly long-range investor, of which I am practically a vanishing breed, the profits are so tremendously greater. And I love this quote from Warren Buffett. He says, if you aren't willing to hold a stock for 10 years, don't even think about owning it for 10 minutes. Now I have one more quote from Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger says the best thing a human being can do is help another human being know more. If you learned something from this episode, please share it with a friend. And if you'd like more content, check out our newsletter at cmqinvesting.substack.com. It's completely free to sign up, and all of our free subscribers receive an update in their inbox with more information about every new episode as soon as it's released. With all that said, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Thank you for spreading the word. This has been growing a lot faster than I ever could have imagined. My name is Chris Franco. This is Compound Money Quietly, the CMQ Investing Podcast. We'll talk to you soon.